And we're live.
Awesome. Live. Okay, cool, man. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, man. How are you doing?
I am also well. Also well. So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, I've got we get a lot of questions around certain things, so I just kind of have some bullet points basically to go over. And yeah, I'll just kind of shoot them at you, and you kind of just tell me what you think, and we can discuss them a little bit. And that's what we'll do here.
Cool.
So how's that sound to you?
Yeah, that's good. So I think just hitting on some bullet points around like maybe just mistakes people are making within their Facebook ad accounts.
Yep, totally. We should see some like underlying kind of, this is all about mistakes you could be making. So I'll hit you with that first one and let's see what you got here. But okay, so people who do a lot of creative and nothing really works better than their current ads, and even those don't work super great. What do you say to people like that? They do a lot of creative, not a lot of stuff seems to work. Even the stuff that does work doesn't work that great.
Okay. Yeah. So like, I mean, the first question is like, did it ever work, right? Like, if it's never worked, then it's probably a different problem, like your product or something like that. But like, let's say, if you're in an e-commerce brand and you've had like good results in the past, and it's just like recently your results aren't good, and you're kind of like, yeah, I'm doing a ton of creative testing because everybody says do a ton of creative testing. But none of the new creative is really like doing very well. And even my old creative isn't doing very well. Like just my whole ad account isn't doing very well. Really like your new creative maybe is actually doing pretty well. So you have to understand that like your ad account isn't doing well. So you have to take the new creative into context. So if your ROAS target is like 2.5 and your new creative is at like a 1.2 ROAS, you're like, yeah, this new creative, all this creative I'm doing, all this creative testing I'm doing, it sucks. Like none of it's getting above a 1.2 ROAS, but your whole ad account's at like a 1 ROAS. Well, that new creative that's at a 1.2 ROAS, that's like your winner. Like that's doing better than anything else. So you have to contextualize it because your old creatives, they've done well in the past and they've hit your 2.5 to 3 ROAS in the past when you're in season or when it's gifting time or whenever it is that your ad account or your product or your offering does well. So that new creative is actually beating the old creative in poor market conditions, meaning it is probably a winner in good market conditions, and you should graduate that, whatever your graduation process is, and you should continue to invest in that and create more iterations around that. Like that's your control at this point. So like maybe if you created more iterations around that idea that's in that creative, you might get to 1.3, 1.5. Like it's slow grind when your ad account isn't going well, but that's like one of I would say like the biggest mistake people make with creative testing is not looking at the creative test results with relativity in mind, with the relativity of how the whole ad account is doing right now.
Right. It kind of sounds like an oversimplification problem to me a little bit. How you made this arbitrary goal, and anything that doesn't hit that arbitrary goal, you deem as like it's not going well. It's like, well,
right. It might not be completely arbitrary. Like maybe you do need a 2.5 ROAS, but like nothing's hitting that right now. So like you might as well invest in whatever's doing best and like getting closest to it, and then both in money and in resource invest in whatever's doing best, right? So like put your dollars behind it as well as like put your resource of creating more creative behind it as well.
Right. And I mean, you're going to continually never have confidence in anything if you keep cutting the control or the best performing ads, like you pointed out.
Yeah, that's really your new control at this point. Like it's outperforming your control creatives that you're like, oh, those are proven, I'm going to keep spending on those. Like this one's actually doing better even though it's not hitting your target. So it really is your new control as of now.
Right. I think so I have another question here. I think it'll kind of got a good bridge to this next question. Kind of on that oversimplification thing, I think you'll have a lot to say about this. So when people don't know what kind of bids they should use or what kind of bidding strategies, should they use CBO, ABO? How many ads should they have in an ad set? Things like that. What's your take on that kind of thing?
My creative testing structure be in the campaign and ad level. So like, look, I mean, a lot of people feel like, and this is actually with every ad platform, and this happens to me, like I've bought millions of dollars worth of paid ads, right, on Facebook, Google, other ad platforms, natives, things like that. This happens to me as well. So if I'm on a new ad platform where like I just don't have a lot of experience, like every little button, every little setting is like, wait, should I do this or shouldn't I do this? Like what, what do I do? And so I will say this about Facebook is that it's like, I mean, there are some core things like if you're running an e-commerce brand, you probably should be optimizing for conversions. Like that's maybe like a very core thing. Like don't be just running link click campaigns. That's not helpful for you. And you should be optimizing for purchases if you can. But beyond that, like super core stuff, like there isn't like a secret setting at the ad set level, extended or expanded audiences versus not expanded audiences, or all placements versus feeds only versus stories, or really any of that. Or like even just a secret audience, like this kind of, a 5% purchase lookalike of your top 10%, value customers or something like that. Like none of that, like even audiences, like is super highly impactful anymore, or even bidding or whatever. Like there was a time when all of those tactics would like swing big doors, but these days on like Facebook and Instagram, like, direct response marketing. So marketing where I need to put $1 in and I need to get $2 or $3 out, depending on my cost of goods sold and stuff like that. It's always been about like really 3 things, and that's like getting the right message to the right audience at the right time. So Facebook really takes a lot of the work off of you in terms of right audience and right time. Like the algorithm the ads algorithm is so good that it does all that work for you. So it's really just about the right message. And when I say message, I'm like, it's all encumbersome from like the ad level, like think of it from the ad level on to post click, right? So yeah, there's some core things at the campaign level, at the ad set level, like you're probably doing those already. There are some things you can test, like obviously test different audiences. That should be part of your testing rotation. Use different bidding strategies, based on different like times or different whatever. We'll get into that in a little bit, I think, like in terms of like, are you in a bull market right now or a bear market right now? So that's kind of when bidding strategies come into play. But like that, there's not a secret like ROAS button within ad sets, or within campaigns, and nor is there one like on my keyboard or anybody's keyboard. So I know a lot of high volume advertisers, and they all use like semi-different structures. You know what I mean? It's just how they want to look at the data. Like really the focus is, what is your ads? What is your creative? What's your landing page? What's your offer look like? Like how do we get more people's attention and sell people better within that process?
You hit on something kind of interesting here when you said like you brought up other platforms. I think this could be a time when people are experimenting with like new platforms, just given kind of what's going on in media buying in general. So like, how do I say this right? With like the minutia, or like you said something like the little like clickable buttons that are different on every little platform. What's your take on that? Is it kind of move fast and break things, like make the assumption, stick to it, that's your new control, test everything and test it as quick as possible, test everything, but priority is what's key, like what's your general, I know that's kind of a lot in one thing, but what do you think on that?
Okay, so I'll go through kind of 2 levels here, and we'll say like, let's just talk about like buying traffic or like running paid traffic for your brand, for your, for an e-commerce store, for really anything, but like kind of focusing around e-commerce a little bit. There is just like a generalized mindset you should have of being like, of thinking about people, customers, and like their journey and the levels of awareness they have. Like, are they aware of your product already? And they're just, it's like you versus competitors. Are they aware of the problem your product solves, or the thing their product gives them? Or are they just like completely like walking around, like bopping around unaware entirely, right? So it like, there is like this creative side of it, or this like marketing side of it, where you have to think, how do I get people's attention, like based on how aware they are of what I'm selling? And then how do I bring them from that level of awareness to the level of awareness where they're like, I want that, and I want it right now, right? So like, there's that part of it, okay? So like, that's like one half of being like a paid traffic person. And the other half of it is like being like very mindful of like kind of being a scientist, where you need to be testing things. So like if you're like on a new traffic platform and you're like, okay, I don't know what this button does, so like why don't I click it? And then in this ad set, I'll like not click it, and like you just start doing a bunch of, like, you need to be mindful of like how you're like setting up your experiments. So the reason I say being like a scientist is like, if you think about the scientific method, it's like you posit a hypothesis, and you don't even always have to posit a hypothesis as a media buyer, but the second half of the hypothesis is you design the experiment to control as many variables as you can to just see the effect of that one variable that you're like hypothesizing about, right? So let's use Facebook for a second, and let's say that you're like, oh, what is this expanded, I'm targeting people who are interested in golf for my golf brand, but there's this button over here that's expanded interest. Should I check that or not? And what is that like? Okay, well, if you're gonna test that, you need to do it in a very controlled manner. Don't just check it or just don't check it. Or I'm gonna check it in this one, but in this one over here where I'm targeting people interested in the PGA Tour, I won't check it, right? Like what you've done there is you've changed a variable. You're targeting golf and you're targeting PGA Tour, and you've checked it and not checked it. And so like what is the variable? Like what if the PGA Tour one with it not checked performs better? Is that because PGA Tour is a better audience, or because not checked is better?
That's bad.
Right? So you have to think about controlling your variables as you're testing different settings and even different creatives. So like high level, the other half of being a media buyer is being a scientist and understanding what is the purpose of these dollars that I'm running besides driving profit, right? Because if they don't drive profit, then I better learn from them, right? Or even if they do drive profit, I better learn from them. So what am I going to learn from what I'm running right now? And that's maybe like a very high level, and getting more into the specifics of what I mean by that is helpful, but that's like high level being a paid traffic person in general. Like you've got to think about customer journeys, think about your creative, your landing page, your offering, all of that. And then you have to think about like when I'm running the traffic in these platforms, everything I'm doing, every ad set I run, every campaign I run, and every ad I run really, but campaigns and ad sets really specifically should have a purpose, should have a learning, right? Like I should be able to look at this one versus that one and say, I've learned something from that. So that's high level. Low level, I will say that like, if you're on a new traffic platform, there's a lot of like different things. Really like you can accelerate your learning a ton by like, just like, don't just go, I mean, yeah, like you can just start experimenting yourself. And if that's your option, that's your option, that's what you do. But like, get some guidance from somebody who knows that traffic platform. Because a lot of times they'll be able to tell you like, hey, like that audience expansion thing, like I wouldn't really waste money testing that. Like I would just like turn it on or turn it off, right? Whatever. And I would just test those audiences. That way you're not running 3 ads, one golf, no audience expansion, golf, audience expansion, PGA Tour, audience expansion. You can just turn it off and not run that 3rd ad set and spend a little less money while you're getting going. So yeah, like getting guidance from someone who knows is like helpful shortcutting to like the settings that like do or don't matter, or like, there are certain settings that most ad buyers that are specific to a channel are going to know like, yeah, we pretty much never use that.
Yeah, I think that's good advice on both levels, because anybody who's starting out really in anything, not just media buying, like if you have somebody with a ton more experience who's willing to have you bounce ideas off of them, and give you kind of some feedback on that stuff. I mean, obviously take what they're saying and use it, whenever you can. But I do think on the little bit higher level, what you're talking about, it's a lot of pressure, right? That's what I tend to think when I talk to people about it, is like, it's a lot of pressure to feel like everything I do has to have a specific purpose, and I'm trying to find a specific answer to a specific question with every specific thing I launch. But I do think that's kind of the right view. Otherwise you find yourself in the weeds a little bit, and you don't know what to attribute things to. And it's about being scientific, I think.
Okay, yeah, and what I'm going to back up a little bit on myself and say, like, don't let that make it so you don't do it, right? So if you're like, I don't really get what he means by that, like, I mean, I ran a ton of paid traffic without that mindset before I started realizing like, oh, holy crap, things aren't working and I don't know why. Right. And I started like developing this framework of like, oh yeah, like anytime I do something, if it doesn't work, so like, what am I gonna do when it doesn't work? Like I just started thinking about it that way, right? Like what's the reaction if like, hey, that didn't work, but since I ran this versus this, I know I'm going to try this other thing next, right? Like I didn't always do it like that, right? So like, don't let it stop you from starting. Like go ahead and start and do it. But as you actually run paid media, you'll actually develop that on your own, really.
I think that's a key thing there too, is there's no shortcuts to experience, right? Like in anything too.
If
And I think
someone doesn't run a lot of traffic, what we just talked about with like being scientific, they're gonna be like, what? Like, you know what I mean?
right, and you have to, it's exactly it. You know, you have to kind of nourish that skill a little bit of like that experimentation within your ads and stuff with a way that relates to being comfortable to you too, because honestly a lot of the answers to those things I think are, again, like relative to account, even campaign to campaign. You might find, you know, like that targeting expansion thing that the example you use is like, that might, the answer of whether or not to use that, which would be better, might be different campaign to campaign or account to account. And knowing how to test it in any given instance is really the only true answer to be able to find the answer in every instance.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. All right, I think we beat that one a little bit, but that was some good stuff in there. So
dead horse, yeah.
Yeah. All right. On to my third bullet point here. So people who have tried different videos, but they've noticed over, let's assume they do run a significant amount of traffic, and they've tried a bunch of different videos, but they find that one formula just is king. You know, it typically just outperforms everything else. You know, should they even be testing other stuff? If so, like, how do they keep testing different creative when they already, you know, think they know what works best?
Right. So, well, I would like, this is actually super common. Like, okay, you know, hey, we do this thing where we hit like a quick headline, you know, in the first 3 seconds of the video with some motion to stop the scroll. And then we go into some UGC, and then we show the product working. And that's the, you know, that's the formula. So you know, why should we even test like other things? Every time we test other things, it doesn't work as well as that. Okay, so that's like a super common formula in e-commerce. What I just said, very simplified version of it, but
Sure.
super common formula in e-commerce. And that is like, a lot of times it's like, yeah, it crushes everything else. Like anytime we do some like produced video or like some crazy idea, it just doesn't work as well. So a couple things here. So first of all, think about creative in terms of like diversification a little bit. So like, I don't want to like basically be like, hey, this ad kills everything else. I want to throw all of my dollars at that ad. Eventually that creative is going to get fatigued. So I want options. And the way that Facebook's work, and I really try these days to stay away from being like, well, this is how the Facebook algorithm works. Because number one, nobody knows that. And number two, like, we're not trying to game the algorithm anymore. But this isn't gaming the algorithm. I will say this, like, Facebook is like, has a lot of user data on all of your potential customers, and all of them react to different kinds of ads differently. So if you kind of stick with one kind of ad, or even like one ad or like small variations on that one ad, you're bucketing yourself into this narrow little like corner of your audience. And it's not like your fault. You can target other audiences or do whatever, like short of telling Facebook like, no, exclude my 1% purchase lookalike, or something like that, like forcing it out of that audience. Like Facebook like when you put that creative up, Facebook knows like, oh, here's the converters. You know what I mean? Here's the converters. A lot of our ads, or a lot of our audiences now are like wide open, US 18 to 65 plus, no targeting, right? Because it's like all the work is on the creative. The creative creates the audience. So what I would say to that is like, first and foremost, just because another ad doesn't work as well as that ad doesn't mean you shouldn't run it, because it might work for different people, right? So if it hits your metrics, run it. You know, run them together in an ad set. And secondly, I would say think about creative diversification around that formula, right? So let's use the formula I just said. So it's a quick headline with some motion to stop the scroll, then it's some UGC, and then it's like product in action. Okay, can we change up that headline to hit on different pain points or different desired outcomes, or different attention grabbers that will speak to different people? Can we change up the motion that is stopping attention? Can we change up like races or ages of that first person getting UGC? Right, like, so a good example is like, we worked with a skin brand that like they use the founders for all their videos at first. They're like, you know, a white guy and a white girl. They tried using like a couple black girls in one of their shoots, skyrocketed, right? And so now they run it all, right? But like they're in a whole new market segment now that they weren't in before. So like, you know, like, can you change up races, ages, genders at all with those UGC people? Because you'll hit different. So you're still now following the same formula. Product working, product in action. Can you show different things the product does, right? So like, you know, you might have a feature of the product where it's like, hey, this is a wallet that never gets lost. You know, it's also a wallet that has this sweet little like pull tab where your cards come straight up like this, right? Like, can you show different product in action, or can like the product in action in different environments, right? So like variate on those elements to reach into different pockets, especially if that's your winning formula. So iterate on that formula, and then also iterate on your ad units. So use that formula, like, can you translate that formula of your ad into like maybe say a blog article, and then run traffic, just run your like the headline with an attention grabbing image to the blog article. Can you run it as a Canvas ad? Can you run it as a collections ad? Can you create a carousel with that video at the front and other things in the carousel? Or can you like conceptualize like repurposing the shots into a carousel of images? You know what I mean? Or different pieces of the video into a carousel. All different kinds of things like so iterate on it like with different like iterate on each piece of the formula, iterate on that like ad to fit different ad units, and keep running your ads that don't work as well because they're working for a different like segment of your audience. So like, yeah, that's the same thing you're doing with iterating the ad units too. Like some people in your audience that you want to target might actually respond better to like an article than they will a video. And then if they are that kind of person, Facebook is now going to target them where it wouldn't have before with your video.
I love that. I love when you have like you kind of nail it with just like a bite-sized answer too, because the summation of the whole thing, I mean, that was all great info, but you said creative creates the audience, you know, that's like, and to some people, I think they get their.
I can't take credit for that statement. I think I heard that somewhere, but yeah.
I mean, it sounds like those viral kind of, you know, I'm sure that's the header on many a lead magnet or something.
Yeah, that's the, you know, the drum that every you know, paid media agency or Facebook, you know, big Facebook buyer, big Facebook advertisers are sort of saying right now.
But I think some people are going to get to that kind of realization quicker naturally than others, and some people even take it for granted. They're like, yeah, I know it, but you don't, you know, as detailed as you just went into all that. It's like, how well do you understand that concept, and how willing are you to like kind of dig into it a little bit more, and you know, especially if you're somebody like in this question where it's like, oh, I tend to know what's working. It's like, well, you tend to probably have a pretty, again, like oversimplified view of what it takes to work. You know, you're looking at 3 pieces of your creative, when it's like you could be dialing this into, you know, dozens of pieces. And
right, it can increase your, and the other thing that will happen is like as you scale, those same 3 creatives that always work, like they're going to get fatigued faster, or like you're going to try and scale, and Facebook's just going to circle the wagon on those same people that respond to that kind of ad. You know what I mean? And their ROAS is going to get worse. So yeah, that it's true, and it's the harder thing, right? It's easier to like, you know, launch that same creative to a different audience, or try it in some manual bids, or that's easier. But
even easier on like a conceptual level, because again, like it's a lot of pressure to be like, I'm going to design something that's similar but just different enough to where I feel confident that this, like you said, like the race of the first user generated content or something, like, you know, a lot of these things I think to a lot of people seem like very small changes, and it's a lot of pressure to assume that you're going to be able to rely on data that you get from such a small tweet, relatively small tweet. But yeah, it's what you said.
It's not really about data at that point either. It's about taking advantage of like Facebook's delivery algorithm, right?
Sure, of
like
course.
If they all work, run them all together. You know.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's not even just about data. It's crazy. In a platform where it seems like it's all about data, it's not always about data either. All right, so let's tie a knot on that one. Move on to this next thing here. So. Okay, so if somebody usually launches ads every day, and they found that it's worked well for a certain amount of time, let's say 6 months, maybe a year, whatever, you know, longer term-ish. But lately, that doesn't seem to be working as well. You know, something has, you know, might have changed, but they're doing the same thing they've done. Should they not be launching that many ads anymore? or maybe what do you think is kind of the culprit of that?
Let me kind of just like box this question into a bigger question, and that is like the question of like, look, this is how I've always done it and it's worked really well, and like something's up with Facebook right now because it's not working anymore. So yeah, that actually, it could be the case, you know. So there are a lot of factors, you know. I'm not even gonna like hit on, like, let's not talk about seasonality, because seasonality is very real, especially in e-commerce. And even if you don't think your brand is seasonal, it is in some degree, right? Like there are just very few products that are like true like year-round products that people don't buy more during gifting periods or less during gifting periods, you know?
Even back to your other thing, it's not just data, you know, Facebook's kind of, it's algorithms and methods, it's all tweaked seasonally.
Right. So, you know, let's not even like touch on seasonality or whatever. And let's just kind of like hit this idea. So this is a really common one. The way that question you said, that's like really common among like people who are like really like buying, you know, media for their own brand and running their ads for their own brand. Like they're just like really, I'm launching new ads every day. I'm doing tons of creative testing. I'm optimizing every day. I'm doing all this stuff.
Earning the midnight oil.
Yeah, like it really just isn't working anymore or whatever, which is great. Like launching lots of creative, like for the most part, I totally preach that. But I want to, like I said, box that into the bigger question of like, this is how I've done things and it's worked really well. And like, it's not really working anymore. So am I not supposed to do it this way anymore? Is like that a Facebook trend or something? So outside of just like outside factors that are seasonality or your product just isn't on trend anymore, or whatever, that, you know, other things there could be. Let me talk about like, just like the way we approach like our strategy within ad accounts. It's not the same always. So like if you were investing like in the stock market, your strategy for investing would be different for like during a bear market and during a bull market. And that's like the easiest way to think about this is that, you know, let's use like Q4, November, Black Friday, like that for many brands is like a big time bull market. And what you do during that time to maximize the ad account, like it's different, right? So like you could be launching a lot of stuff using tons of auto bid, using rules to turn things off quick, whatever, you know, or like in the example that you said, you could be launching ads every day, and that's a bull market. So tons of stuff works, right? In a bear market, most things don't work. So you don't do it like that anymore, right? Like you don't use the same strategy to invest in a bear market and a bull market. You don't use the same strategy to buy ads in a bear market and a bull market, because ads they're just an investment in your business. So like it really the same thing, like bear market versus bull market is like the easiest way to think about it. Like this is just a generalized period of ad account is down. You can't approach your strategy the same way as you did before. So in the example you said, you know, you might think about a strategy of like launching, like kind of prioritizing your creatives a little bit more, figuring out like which ones you think are the best chance of working and launching like weekly instead. And then iterating on like your learnings from that weekly. And then, you know, maybe launching with cost cap bidding strategies to like cap your loss and tell Facebook, hey, I don't want you to spend if you're not at least at this level of ROAS or cost per acquisition or cost per purchase or whatever. So yeah, really that's it. Like, and that's not what you do during a bull market, because in a bull market, you want to spend money because it's making you money. So yeah, like just don't approach it with the same strategies. Like market conditions change, and like use different strategies in different market conditions.
Yeah, it sounds like for a bull market, you know, machine gun strategy more or less, and then kind of in the other, it's a little bit in the bear market, it's a little bit more kind of tactical, like sniper rifle-esque maybe, you know, like still making sure you get your shots in, but a little more, you know, yeah. All right.
Good way to, like, good analogy for sure.
I think you hit that one out of the park. I don't really have too much else. You want to put a knot on that at all, or? Okay, cool. All right, I'm going to jump right.
My bite-sized attempt for that one is like, you don't invest the same in a bear and bull market. So you don't buy ads the same in a bear and bull market because they're an investment in your business.
Sure, yeah.
That's the one-liner to remember there.
Yeah, right. Lots of factors, and even environment is a huge, I mean, maybe the biggest factor of all.
Probably the biggest, really. We just don't know.
Exactly, yeah. Okay, so here's another one then. How about kind of back to ads or campaigns here. So my retargeting campaigns, so if you have retargeting campaigns that stopped working recently, like say in the last month, did something happen with the iOS and Facebook kind of interaction that's going on here that makes the retargeting you know, a lot specifically about retargeting. Something that makes retargeting not work. Is there anything
Yeah.
into that?
We can't, at this moment, we can't talk Facebook ads or any paid ads for e-commerce without talking about iOS. So I will just say, yes, there's a possibility, depending on where you're watching this, when you're watching this, that you've been affected by some kind of like data sharing change, right? That's certainly always a possibility. However, the other big mistake that I see a ton when people ask about like retargeting performance, right? Like, hey, it was crushing it and now it's not, or like it wasn't doing so well and now all of a sudden it is, or whatever, is like the other like thing that most people overlook. Like, weirdly, I'm gonna say it sounds obvious, but like it's budget allocation. So like, you know, maybe like my retargeting ads were doing really well when my budget allocation was about like 80% prospecting, 20% retargeting. And now maybe I'm in a bull market. And so retargeting is really the only thing that's working. And I'm lowering my prospecting budget. And my allocation is more like 50-50 now. And now my retargeting is tanking too. And I'm like, great, right? Like now nothing's working. Well, you've changed your allocation, right? So like you've probably not feeding those retargeting audiences as much.
Right.
Right. And this is like so obvious when I say it, but like it's just a big thing that a lot of people don't think of. Facebook's an ecosystem. So the other thing that can happen, and don't worry too much about this, but like some of the stuff you turned off might have been some of the stuff that was setting up your retargeting really well.
Right.
You know, and that, like those people who came from those ads were doing super well in your retargeting audiences, and you turn those off. Don't worry about that, because it's like you got to cut what's not working, and like you can't like worry about, oh, but if I cut this, then you know, anything you do in your ad account, the whole thing is an ecosystem. So any like thing you do is going to affect the whole ecosystem. So don't like, just manage it to your best of your ability and the best like logical decisions you can make. But that's like the big thing, is that, you know, with retargeting performance specifically, a lot of times we're just like not really thinking through like what is happening at the prospecting level that could be, or the re-engagement level. If we're like retargeting or hitting video viewers now and we weren't before, and it's like, well, yeah, you know, now a lot of those people would have converted on retargeting are converting on your, you know, video view re-engagement campaigns is what I usually call them. So yeah, it's just an ecosystem.
Totally. That I think just about anybody who's bought a certain amount of media, I mean, there's always going to be that tipping point, especially in retargeting, where you start to allocate more that way, and you're just going to see a decline in efficiency. I mean, it's just, that's about the only thing, like death, taxes, and that, right? Like,
yeah, plus market conditions again, you know.
Sure. Yeah, and that you know, that how things are setting up retargeting. I always, you know, when I have different objectives, you know, or optimizing for like add to carts and certain prospecting or something, you know, you tend to feel like I always want to give that thing a nudge. I'm like, yeah, but that's got to be helping retargeting, right? But it is tough, you know, and it's hard to navigate sometimes.
Yeah, maybe not, you know. And so like another thing like you can try too is like, you know, thinking through objectives, like maybe checking your retargeting frequency if you feel like you are having like maybe just an oversaturation on retargeting. What was the frequency when it was working? What was the frequency now that it's not? You could combat that by like adding more ads in ad units into retargeting, by like, you know, breaking up your retargeting audiences into either smaller audiences, 3 days, 7 days, 14 days, or larger ones, like saying, hey, I'm running all these small ones, why don't I just go 30, or something like that. So those are some things you can try. Another, you know, kind of, you can also try like frequency capping, or if you're using the purchase objective on retargeting, if you use purchase objective on all of your top of funnel traffic and you're only running Facebook ads, you could try using like just a link clicks objective on retargeting, because you've already, like Facebook's already identified that those people are purchasers. Now, if you run a whole bunch of different traffic channels, you know, influencers, all of that, then that might not work so well. But yeah, like that, I mean, just some stuff you could try if, you know, if you are having retargeting problems.
That's good ideas. Yeah. Yeah, I think that probably the bite-sized piece there is like that. I like when you said it's all an environment, it's all an ecosystem, sorry. And anything you change kind of, it's like the circle of life, or like the food chain thing. Like you overfish one spot and, you know, sometimes getting—
now beavers are going extinct. Like,
yeah, exactly. And sometimes going the exact opposite direction that you originally thought is how to kind of get those fish to repopulate that area again, kind of find that homeostasis, you know.
Right. Yeah. Or just figuring out, like, a big thing with and this is like not really any of our questions, but like this kind of relates earlier to what I was saying about like, what are your learnings or what am I going to do when this doesn't work? Like another like question I like to ask myself a lot is like, as I'm making moves, like how would I reverse out of this? You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for sure. I mean, I think if you're driving a car, you know, you naturally ask yourself that, right? But buying media, I don't know that it's all that natural, you know.
I think a lot of times we're optimistic, which is great. Like we just think it's going to work, right? And we have this new idea and we're like stoked on it. We want it to work, and then it doesn't work. And we're like, oh crap! Like now what do I do? You know what I mean?
And I think
work.
I think a lot of times, maybe specifically for those people who are kind of buying for their own brand or something too. I mean, sometimes you get caught in that, probably getting caught in that mindset where you're like, you kind of need it to work too. You know, you kind of backs against the wall, and you're like, I mean, I'm spraying and praying here, like. So, all right, that's good stuff. I like all that. Okay, so I think we're on to the last thing that I have here, at least. You know, you can always feel free to add on to it, of course. But here's the last thing we've got. So if the ROAS in your ad account has taken a big dive lately, and we're talking account-wide, not just retargeting here. So if the ROAS in your account has taken a dive in the last couple of weeks, but the sales seem to be doing okay, and you know the profit's still okay, like, you know, what's going on?
The actual sales in your Shopify store, your store, are good, but like for whatever reason, like, hey, Facebook seems to be broken because like it's not tracking a whole bunch of these conversions.
Exactly. Facebook's telling you a horror story, but you're like tentatively like, I'm optimistic. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So this is actually like a big point I've been making lately, and this is like even more pertinent now with like, you know, iOS Mageddon on the horizon. And that is that like as a brand grows and as you add other marketing channels, like the paths for somebody to buy become like exponentially more, right? So you have to stop believing what the ad accounts say on any channel. So this isn't just Facebook, Google, Snapchat, native, whatever, email. So like this, you know, there is a world, this is like not uncommon, where if you look at a time period and you add up the amount of revenue that your email tool says it drove, and the amount of revenue that like your SMS tool says it drove, and the amount of revenue that Facebook says it drove, and the amount of revenue that Google says it drove, and the amount of revenue that, I don't know, Snapchat says it drove, that adds up to more revenue than you actually made, right? So like just thinking about it from that, like, oh yeah, they're some of them are taking credit for the same sales. So that's like one end of the problem. There's like another end of the problem too, where it's like, oh, it seems like they're all like under attributing. And that is like, okay, well, there's some just like generalized like bubble effect of your advertising in general. So like the best way to like think about this is like, I think a lot of times we like look at our marketing, we see like, we start seeing people as numbers, but like people don't follow the clean paths we want them to follow
100
to purchase. Yeah. So it's like, yeah, you got it. Like you were talking about this earlier, like you like never, a lot of times like I'll actually do a thing, and this is because I'm like an advertiser and I want to get more e-commerce ads. Like I'll do a thing where I see like a cool product on Instagram and I'll just like click it and buy it right then, because I want Facebook and Instagram to like know I'm a buyer, right? But like you do a thing where you're like, I don't know, like I might see it, I go add it to my cart, I don't purchase, like I almost never buy it, right? And then, but then like maybe 3 months later, I hear it on a podcast, and then I'm like, all right, and then I search them and I click on their organic result and buy. And in that scenario, nobody, like Facebook didn't get credit for your sale, email didn't get credit, nobody got credit for that sale. Right. So there's over attribution, there's under attribution. Bottom line is you gotta like, the metrics on Facebook only matter within Facebook's sandbox, especially as you grow. So as you add more customers, as you add more traffic channels, both of those things like exponate the different paths people can take to buy. I don't know if exponate is the word, but exponentially increase.
I like it. I got what you know.
Yeah, you knew what I was saying. But yeah, so like your ROAS target in Facebook only matters to Facebook. So for example, I might have a brand who their total, what we call MER target. So MER is like just your top level ROAS, like the total revenue you make over the total ad spend you make. It's maybe a little more complicated than that, but I'll simplify it and say like, if I spend $100,000 on ads this month, I need to make like $300,000 in revenue, and then my business is healthy. So that doesn't necessarily mean your ROAS on Facebook has to stay 3. That might be your MER number that you need, or your MER target that you're shooting for. And you might decide, hey, actually on Facebook, the thing that tends to relate best to like my business health is when I change my attribution window to 7-day click, 0 view, and my target ROAS on that attribution window is about 1.8. And that actually seems to correlate best with like business health for me. And I can pretty confidently scale up and down on that ROAS, and then you do the same for Google and stuff, anything that you're running paid media on, like your email channels, your SMS channels, they're just going to get a lot of attribution because they are going to drive a lot of actual last click attribution, where that was the last place somebody came from before they bought.
Right. It's like reporting doesn't happen in a perfect world, right? So that's exactly what you're saying there. And I love the like,
we do a whole show on attribution modeling, different models, first click, last click, weighted, who gets credit for the sale.
Sure. And that's always going to be an ongoing conversation too. You're never going to crack that code perfectly. It's probably an always evolving type of thing. It's like, it reminds me of like, if you, and when you say it opens up more possibilities of like route to a conversion, essentially, the more, channels you have and things like that, it reminds me of like a maze. And it's like, if you solve a maze, you could erase all the dead ends you took on the way there, and you're like, here's the answer to the how I got to the middle of the maze. But in reality, you did take all those dead ends. Like that's kind of like when like one channel stops and another one picks up attribution, or even sometimes it would show like, multiple routes,
It's like a maze with multiple ways to solve it,
Right. It becomes a very complex thing. And I think the important thing that people can take away is like what you said there at the end is like, you don't need to worry about it being precisely the most accurate. You need to figure out what works best relative to when actual sales come in, however you do that really. And I think there's some creativity involved in that kind of.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so I think like one of the big things I say is like set the North Star metrics that are right for your business, that are like internal source of truth metrics, meaning they come from your actual sales numbers. So I'll give you an example. Like we work with a brand that's very big, and they have this problem like big time. So like if they add all of their channels together, it'll be like 3x, 4x, 3 times to 4 times the amount of revenue they actually make. So at this point, their ROAS on Facebook is 7 or 8, but we don't know if that's true, or 11, whatever we want it to be, really. But we don't know if that's true because Facebook is just circling the wagons on those people it knows is going to buy, and they could be coming from email or what. And so like the brand owner is like, I just want to know like, what are we making from this channel? What is this channel contributing? And it's so hard because I'm like, I understand your question, like I really do, but like, what if somebody clicks on a Facebook ad, opts into your email list from that Facebook ad, they don't buy that day, they come and search you on Google later, or they're searching for your product on Google later, and they click on yours and they're like, oh yeah, I remember this brand. And they go and they add it to cart, but they don't buy it that day. And then later their abandoned cart email hits and they go and they finish the purchase. Like, does email get that sale? Does Google get that sale? Google got the add to cart. Facebook was the first introduction. Like, who gets that sale? There's some credit for all of them in reality, right? And so people say, well, weighted attribution. Well, I mean, yeah, but what's the weighting model, right? Like, we don't need to go into that, but like, it's just people don't follow. That's like a very common path that people might follow within like a week or two. All of those channels are going to take credit for that sale. So like for that brand, I got on a little bit of a tangent here. Like, they have true internal source of truth North Star metrics, and there are 4 of them that push and pull on each other. So there's our cost per new acquired customer. So the CAC is what people call that, cost per acquisition, cost per acquired customer, number of customers acquired, MER, and revenue, right? Because they have a revenue goal that they want to hit. Mm-hmm. They have an MER goal. They have an MER that they need in order to stay profitable. They have their number of new acquired customers dictates their future business health because they have a lot of repeat customers. Sure. Cost per acquired customer pushes and pulls on the other ones. So if the CAC is $40, then we could get 10,000 new customers for $400,000 in a month. And if we make, let me do some math here. Let's say they need a 10 MER. They don't need a 10 MER, but let's say they need a 10 MER to make the math easy for me. If they make $4 million that month, then they've hit their target. But if the cost per acquisition is 65,000 right now, or $65 right now, they're going to have to spend 650K, and they're not going to hit their MER target if they acquire 10,000 new customers. So now we have to decide, do we acquire fewer customers and hit our MER target? Do we go ahead and acquire those customers, not hit our MER target? Or do we pull back, like not hit our revenue goal? You know what I mean? So do we pull back to where it's more efficient, but not do as much revenue and not hit our revenue goal, right? So like all of those metrics push and pull on each other. So develop some North Star metrics that are right for your brand, not necessarily those four, but that are right for your brand, that like push and pull on each other in the right way. And those are your like guiding metrics at all times in any given month. And then what Facebook says the ROAS is only relevant within Facebook, right? So like a good example that I use for that brand is like we had a 7 ROAS in February and like a 3.5 ROAS in March, but all of those North Star metrics were better in March because we were using more exclusions in their ad counts, so Facebook couldn't target a lot of people who are already going to buy. So yeah, like it doesn't matter what Facebook says the ROAS is. It doesn't actually relate to your business health at a certain point. I mean, I shouldn't say it doesn't relate. It correlates if you like.
It's relative.
If you find the right target, if you find the right way to look at it.
Right. It's all relative, right? I think that's kind of been the overarching kind of theme of a lot of these questions, really, is kind of just having a relative view of stuff. So John, we're kind of winding down towards the end. I can't help it. I'm going to squeeze in a sports reference because I'm a football fan, big football fan. I know you're a big basketball fan. Are you aware of like spider graphs, like what those are?
No.
For like a combine athlete or something. So do they do the combine in NBA?
I believe there's an NBA. Well, yeah, I think there's an NBA combine.
I'm a football fan.
I don't know. Yeah.
They're 2 years in now of no combine because of COVID stuff. But anyway, they usually take like the combine results and then make a spider graph for each prospect. And so like, it's kind of like you start with a center point and you get a shape based on like your 40 time is kind of one axis, and then your bench press reps, and then, and it makes like some, you might have 10 different events, right? Your broad jump, I don't know all the things they do, the high jump, all the different things. And it kind of gives you a particular shape, and different prospects, based off their profile, they kind of get a different shape. And when you were talking about the 4 like North Stars, I couldn't help but think of like a spider graph. And it reminds me of like when somebody gets way too hyped up on like a 40 time of a certain athlete, when like we know in sports, like that's not all that matters is 40 time, but it does say they're fast. But a lot of times those guys have like this really weird, like just like their graph is super long on the 40 time and everything else is really small. And when you get those 4 North Stars in, it's kind of like, oh, you kind of just want to fill that space as good as possible. If it was you
might decide at some certain point of year to over-index into one, right? So like
exactly.
That brand, what they sell, they're going to have a big Mother's Day. So they might say, hey, we're going to under-index on MER, and we're not going to have as good of MER, but we're going to over-index on customers acquired in April, because we know in Mother's Day, all those customers and subscribers we acquire now are going to lead to huge sales on Mother's Day, and that's going to lead to big revenue and big MER in that month, no matter what's happening on cost per acquisition.
Totally. And I think obviously like North Stars are different for business to business, so that could even like the results of how you are kind of moving towards those things might dictate or kind of illustrate to you what are real good indicators of like what should be a North Star and what isn't. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to like. I was in like a sports thing. We always end up talking about sports.
Well, I use tons of sports references for marketing usually, but I didn't use any today.
Yeah, well, I got one in there for us. So too bad you didn't know what the spider graphs are already. But anyway, it would have probably landed a little bit better if you did. But that's okay. I'll take. It makes sense to me. And there's.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, what was that? I think you broke up a little.
You had to explain it anyway for people who didn't know.
Right. I think there's bound to be like 2 or 3 people who watch this who are gonna be like, I know what he was talking about, but it's anyway. All right, man. So yeah, we're getting down there. I don't have anything else prepared. I'm good here, but I'll go ahead and give you the parting shot. Why don't you just kind of give us a nice little, parting words of wisdom. I'm trying to talk here to let you. It looks like you're kind of picking it up. I'm trying to give you time to think here, and I like the idea of you ending it. So, John, when you're ready, take it away, man.
Yeah. So I think that like my parting words of wisdom, especially like, let's just dial in, focus in on like Facebook for a second, because that's sort of how we started this. And then we got into like just paid media across channels. But dialing into Facebook, like spend your time and effort thinking about like, why would people actually, who would actually buy your product and why would people actually buy your product, and research that. Like go look at your reviews, like go talk to your actual customers, go like look at the messages you're receiving in Messenger and in customer support, and stuff like that. And like understand like who your people are and understand the different reasons like why they're buying your product. And then understand like their different like barriers, like is price a barrier, is unsure, like they're not sure, they don't trust you, they don't trust the product, they don't think it'll work for them, right? Like think through all of that stuff and like create just like a really compelling value proposition, right? So just focus on doing a very good job of getting attention and getting the right people's attention. So you know those people, you know how to get their attention, and then just creating a really compelling value proposition for them in your ads, in your landing page, with the offer that you're like, you know, giving them for the product. And really like if you do that, like it makes the whole advertising process just so much easier. Like, you know, if you've got like just a great value prop, you know your market well, you're going to be fine, right? Like if you know how to speak to them, you don't have to target them in your ad sets. Like if you just like know how to speak to them, that will do it. Like that will do the trick. So really on Facebook, just spend your energy thinking about that, and that'll work.
Awesome, man. Yeah, people are people, not numbers. So
yeah.
All right. Well, that'll do it then, I guess. And hope you guys choose to tune in for another video here soon. And later, everybody.